Welcome back. It's time for Black and White, and today we're discussing sexual harassment. And of course, this is behavior shown onto subordinates, usually based on a promise of some benefits, but of course it is unwanted sexual behavior, and of course that's why it is termed as harassment. And joining the conversation, we have Jen Godia, who is Programs Manager for Women in News, as well as a trustee of the African Gender and Media Initiative Trust, as well as Winnie Odali, who is an advocate of the High Court. Welcome to the show, ladies. Now, in your view, I'll start with you, Mrs. Godia. What would you define as sexual harassment, far away from my own definition?
Sexual harassment is unwanted and offensive behavior that is of sexual nature. And it leaves the victim feeling threatened, feeling undignified, feeling humiliated, feeling threatened.
And would you agree with that definition, or what would you add?
I also agree with that definition.
Yes.
Sexual harassment is unsolicited and unwanted sexual advances or requests for sexual favors. Unsolicited in the sense that the victim has not asked for it. They don't want it. Unwelcome in the sense that, yes, they don't want it, but you still persist with the sexual advances.
And usually this is sometimes, or a lot of times, in the work setup, where your agenda at the workplace is to accomplish certain duties, but then you're having an individual who's trying to, impose their quote-unquote desires on you, making it difficult for you to conduct your duties. But a lot of times this goes under the waters, like nobody talks about it, or you find it is talked about like an urban legend, so and so is like this and that, but then officially a lot of people do not make formal reports, which makes it a challenge to actually deal with. So Mrs. Godia, what do you feel, in your opinion, makes it more difficult for women or even men to come forward and say, I'm being harassed and I need this done? Because at the end of the day, it makes working very, very difficult for most of the victims.
Sexual harassment in the workplace becomes difficult to report because employers have not instituted sexual harassment policies. When an organization has in place an active sexual harassment policy that is known to all the staff, members of staff, that is known to all the clients, that is known to everybody that is coming within that premises, then it will not happen. Because sexual harassment policy is actually an action that will help to prevent sexual harassment from happening in the first place. And also because people don't report, because who do I report to? If you have a policy in place, then somebody will know that if it happens to me, I can go to this person. Because within that sexual harassment policy, you will have indicated that if sexual harassment happens to you, you go to this person or that person. Maybe there's even a committee, because if it's my boss harassing me and he's the one people are supposed to report to, I can't go to him. So you must have identified a group of people where one can go and report to. So unless organizations put in place sexual harassment policies, that are not just documents put in the shelf, so if somebody comes to do research, you tell them, we have one, or the ones where you have like a paragraph in your human resource manual, which is the common thing with most organizations. So, and also, when you create awareness around that sexual harassment policy, you must also be able to identify the different forms of harassment. Which one are we talking about? Because maybe there are some things that we tolerate. For example, a friendly hug in the office is not sexual harassment. But then when it escalates to something else,
like groping,
like massaging of the neck, that is not welcome, like my colleague Winnie has said, then that becomes sexual harassment. And in the workplace, we are working men and women. So there could be possibility of romantic relationships taking place. This must be welcome. But you see, from the definition of sexual harassment, you are told that it is unwelcome.
Unsolicited, unwelcome.
It is unwelcome, it is unsolicited, it is unwanted.
Yes, absolutely. So the fact that the other person is saying no to you or is acting uncomfortable should indicate that this is unwelcome. And do you have your own take on how this becomes a challenge for most people in the workplace to actually get justice or reprieve from?
Yes, actually, to add on to what my colleague has said about the sexual harassment policy, you find that also our African culture dictates how such matters are treated, because first of all, even to talk about sexual matters, sexuality, you find that it's sort of a taboo to talk about that. And do we create a safe place or a safe environment for the victim of sexual harassment to actually get redress? Who are they even going to talk to? Who are they going to report to? Is it the police? Are they, when you go to the police, our police in Kenya, are they willing to take up such harassment matters, sexual harassment matters seriously? Even if we go to the courts, because according to the Sexual Offences Act, it creates an offense to, if you engage in sexual harassment, it is an offense. But are the systems that are supposed to take up those matters, are they really equipped? Are they trained? So I think that is really an issue that needs to be addressed.
So obviously there are many things that a victim, both male or female, might be going against, because at the same time you are working and this is how you put food on your table. So if you go out and speak against this, then you might be risking your own job, and mostly these are people in power. So outside of there being a policy or a strong culture whereby you can speak out for yourself, how does the law come in to help these people or even protect them at the same time, protecting their way of earning a living? What are the avenues that one can explore?
Okay, so first of all, the Employment Act puts in place this issue of the sexual harassment policy, and that is the first step. So this sexual harassment policy is basically, any organization, especially one that has at least 20 employees, must have a sexual harassment policy. This sexual harassment policy basically should define what sexual harassment is. It should state, for examples of sexual harassment. It should be able to state what is the procedure to lodge a complaint if you think that maybe you have been sexually harassed at your workplace. So what is the procedure? What are the disciplinary measures that need to be taken? And what are the penalties? We also have a provision in the Sexual Offences Act, as I have said before, and this makes it a criminal offense to engage in sexual harassment. And this provision targets public officials, and it also targets persons who are in a place of authority, because you find that most of the times sexual harassment that happens at the workplace is usually, the harasser is usually a person who is in authority, who is exercising dominance over the victim. So it makes it an offense, and if you're found guilty of sexual harassment, you will be sentenced to at least 3 years imprisonment or a fine of 100,000.
But if we take an example of the Me Too movement in the United States, many of these victims did not speak out until they found comfort in numbers, because coming out as an individual is usually tricky if nobody else is standing with you and promising you that you'd get reprieve. Some of them are still struggling to get justice. Now, you are, Ms. Godia, you are the programs manager for Women in News. The environment in the newsroom or in the business of telling people what is happening exposes a lot of women to, sexual harassment, or perhaps there are cultures that would have people normalize things that would otherwise be considered sexual harassment. So for a woman existing in such an environment where it is commonplace for certain things to be said that would otherwise be considered offensive or even harassment, how does one live in this environment and, you know, try and make their focus remain on their work?
The employer
Yes.
is entitled to make the workplace safe for everybody. Right from the time I'm given my employment letter,
Yes.
the employer must ensure that I'm safe. Whether I'm working on site, like within the standard center, for example,
Yes.
or I'm working off site, which means I could be doing some assignment outside. My employer is supposed to make sure that I'm safe. And through this, my employer, who could be the media owner, the board, the senior managers, are supposed to ensure and know that they are supposed to protect their employees.
Yes.
Through this, then, they must create awareness and make an organization to be zero tolerant to sexual harassment.
Yes.
So that anybody who is being onboarded into the organization knows that the organization is zero tolerant to sexual harassment. For example, my employer, the World Association of Newspapers and News Publishers, WANIFRA, when you're signing your contract, within it, there is a provision for sexual harassment that tells you you will not in any way tolerate sexual harassment. The UN, whether you are attending their conference, whether you are receiving their money as a implementing partner, they will tell you sexual harassment will not be tolerated. So employers are supposed to make their organizations zero tolerant to sexual harassment, so that anybody who is coming in, whether they are guests like the ones we just found at the studio now, they come in knowing that even if it is a beautiful girl who is doing your interview, you are not supposed to sexually harass her. And we know that people who have power, because sexual harassment is not about sex. Sexual harassment is about power. So long as this person with power comes into this building or anywhere that we consider to be our workplace, this person is supposed to know that the organization is zero tolerant to sexual harassment. So make it public.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, perhaps, like I was saying earlier on, it could be a culture, to the point that it was probably started off by people who were in this company decades ago, and the newbies came in and they joined this culture of saying whatever they want, maybe hugging or giving unwanted hugs, and to the point that the defense of the perpetrator would be, but I do this with so and so, and
but culture is not static. Culture evolves. So you can't say that because other people came and they went.
This is
culture
what
is not static. Culture evolved. Personally, I worked at the Standard. The conversation that we are having at the Standard now was never there during my time. So that means that the Standard as an organization is growing and is evolving and is looking at some things that it never used to look at before. If I can tell you the kind of conversations we used to have in the newsroom, you'd just put your hands in your ears because they are not conversations that we are having here right now. And I'm sure none of you is having them. So culture is not static. You cannot use that lame excuse that it's a cultural thing within this organization.
It just happens here.
I've even had people say that in some cultures, we don't agree when a woman says no once. You must say that no many times.
Imagine that.
No, 5, 10 times. I've told you no, I don't want. So just accept that one no from me. But if somebody keeps on persisting, again, then you come back to the definition that whatever you're doing is offensive because this person doesn't want it. No. And they've told you no from the beginning. So you can't use culture as an excuse because culture is not static.
Absolutely.
And if we have laws in place and if we have policies in place, she has quoted what is in the legal statute. I'm just saying, as an organization, we need to take responsibility. And even if you look at the International Labour Organization, it just came up with new laws surrounding sexual harassment in the workplace. And everybody should just pick up on this and ensure that their employees are safe. And again, I've said, you create awareness.
Right.
You do capacity building so that people, some people sexually harass without knowing that they are sexually harassing.
Yes.
And some people are sexually harassed without them knowing that they are being sexually harassed. Meaning that there are witnesses who then will not talk. Again, that is what makes sexual harassment in the workplace to be the elephant in the room, because you get witnesses who know that Jane is sexually harassing Winnie, and they are not able to talk because, again, we have not removed barriers.
Right.
Meaning then organizations must remove barriers that allow for sexual harassment to happen.
What you're saying, creating safe spaces so that people...
and any workplace must be safe for the employees, whether it is a woman among men, a woman among women, because sexual harassment is not only perpetrated by men to women, although that is the majority. It can happen to both sexes.
Yes.
A woman can sexually harass a man can sexually harass another man, a woman can sexually harass a man, but majority of those who are victims of sexual harassment are women, because we know that it's majority of men who are people who are holding positions of power.
Yeah, right. Now, you've talked about training, capacity building. Your take on how this can be handled?
Okay, so just to chip into the conversation,
the cultural
culture. Who creates culture? It is us.
It is us, yes.
It is the employees in an organization that create that culture, and the buck stops with us. If we decide no more of sexual harassment, enough is enough, then that is it. If you want a safe space for yourself, I believe that you have to create that safe space for someone else. Also on the issue of capacity building, I believe it is very, very important, because it is not enough just to have a sexual harassment policy, because many organizations would just since it is a legal requirement, let's just draft something, then we keep it somewhere. Like if you ask employees in any organization, do you even know
what is the sexual
what is our sexual harassment policy? They don't know.
Right.
So we need to actually train
make them aware.
Yeah, we need to make them aware of what their sexual harassment policy states. And also I'll go further, even to the government responsibility in this matter. We need to do capacity building for law enforcement officers, the courts, the judiciary, the police officers, so that they can be able to handle such matters if it gets out of the organization level. Because if they are not aware of what they're supposed to do in such matters, then how are you going to get redress for sexual harassment?
That is true. And I would like to bring also focus to the issue of the position of the individual, that possible victim in the company. Many of them sometimes are just interns. Sometimes we are talking about people on contract or even subordinate staff who don't feel that they are encompassed in some of these policies, or like they are really part of the company to the point that they can actually raise it when they are being harassed or they're going through, they feel they're not empowered enough. So how does one in such a position handle a situation where someone in power is victimizing them?
Okay, so I think it still goes back to the empowerment.
Yes.
Because knowledge is power. If you have knowledge, then you will be able to know what mechanisms should I use. And I also think this is where our civil society organizations come in also to do the training. For instance, what we are doing even at the Center for Rights Education and Awareness, we actually go to the community and we empower the women and girls, and we tell them, these are your rights. If someone has sexually harassed you, this is the procedure you should take. This is what you're supposed to do. Even in the informal settlements where such people that you're talking about might be living, so that they know right from the word go. Yes.
Now, I'm thinking obviously of a situation where somebody raises the alarm, I'm being harassed. Perpetrator comes out and says, but that is my girlfriend. You know, it becomes the defense of, and you're at pains of trying to prove whether or not this was consensual or not, because perhaps in the setup, people see you communicating, working together, so they assume there is perhaps a sort of relationship between the two of you. How then can somebody in this position defend themselves, Ms. Godia?
One, when onboarding staff,
yeah,
whether they are interns, whether they are subordinates, whether they are managers,
yeah,
you must make them know that your organization is zero tolerant to sexual harassment. You must make available a copy of your sexual harassment policy to them, so that they are aware. Take them through, give them a copy, so that they are aware that sexual harassment is not tolerated in this organization. You must have a committee, a way or a procedure in which reporting is going to be done. When there's that procedure, who do I report to? Let people who are being onboarded know. Should you be sexually harassed, go to this person.
Yes.
Let these people know the various forms of sexual harassment. Like I've told you, some people might not know.
It's true, because it ranges from mild to quite aggressive.
So you must, when you say from mild to aggressive, we must be able to know, where do we draw the line?
The line, yes.
From a friendly hug to all these things that end up being sexual assault, which then is rape. And when we get to rape, it is not something for this organization to handle. It is not something for HR to handle. That becomes criminal. Then you have to call in the police. So take us through, as your employees, we come in, take us through the sexual harassment policy. Take us through what the organization identifies as the various forms of sexual harassment, so that we know, and also show us the committee and the office where we are supposed to report.
Absolutely.
Do you even allow for anonymous reporting, for example?
Right.
We must be able to know that. How do you protect somebody from retaliation? Because like you say, if the boss says she was my girlfriend, this is an intern. How a young girl who is barely 21, maybe 20, she doesn't even know. She's just trying to set herself up as a working girl. She doesn't even know how to say no. And you know, making an informed decision, like she says, comes from empowerment. Empower people from the time you are onboarding them, so that they know that sexual harassment is not tolerated, so that they can be able to identify the various forms, so that they know where they can go and report, and tell them you are safe. You are safe from the perpetrator.
Right.
Remove them from danger, because the minute sexual harassment is happening, in some organizations you're even told they are serial sexual harassers.
Yes.
You know, they are known.
The urban legends are talking about. They tell you so and so.
I don't know if that's what you call them, but there are people who are known. They identify all the new people who are coming and prey on them. Yeah. So let people know. Just create that empowerment at the point of onboarding. But even for staff who, like you're saying, the ones who are cultural thing, let them know that from today onwards, you are signing on to this policy that you are not going to sexually harass anybody.
Absolutely.
And we've said it's offensive. One thing, it's so humiliating that somebody feels undignified.
Right.
From my experience, people will tell you crazy stories of cases of sexual harassment.
And that's what I was going on to do, instead of us basing our conversation on hypotheticals, do you know some of these examples without naming names? Without naming names.
The latest example that I had last week, somebody touched somebody's private part within the office premises. And the person screamed. What helped for evidence? These cameras that we put in the office. So people went through the cameras and actually saw that action. There was nothing else that could be done. The person just had to leave the organization. So we must ensure, can we have the cameras? Because then that will, because again in sexual harassment, people try to say, where is the harassment?
Evidence.
Where is the evidence? I came and massaged her neck. Where is the evidence? But you see, somebody documents. What we tell in our trainings, particularly in the workplace, can you document? Say today, the 3rd of October, he came, he massaged my neck. The 4th, He came, he did this. The 7th, he came, he did this. So that then you have those incidences. And, you know, when somebody falsely accuses somebody saying, she's my girlfriend, most probably the intern will burst out crying.
Yes, because...
And you will see that, like in newsrooms, you have one. In media and communication schools, you have very many girls or women enrolling for those courses.
Yeah.
They come here for internship.
Yeah.
What I'm told is somebody will tell you, like those of you who are in electronic media, you are told you want to know about a mixer. I don't know what a mixer is, but maybe you can tell me. There's something called mixing in electronic.
True.
You want to learn about mixing.
Yes.
You must do this for me.
Yes.
So the quid pro quo thing, this for that, makes it very difficult for many people.
And you're desperate for a job. There's high
desperate.
Competition. You know, you're trying to stand out to your boss. It becomes...
You don't want to. You are on attachment, so you must report that you actually did an attachment
to pass
and this
the class.
boss will have to do a report that you are actually in that organization and you did an attachment. So where do you get that recommendation that you are actually there? It makes it very difficult.
Exactly.
But so long as we make rules and we say that these are the rules and we are not going to tolerate anything that goes against these rules, then we are going to protect the employees that we have.
Yeah. Now, as we wind up, Ms. Odali, could you just paint a picture of why it is very important for the documentation she's talking about in order for there to be a case, in case this comes to a level where there is need for prosecution? Yeah.
I think there's need for documentation because our courts are courts of law and courts of facts, and you need to produce your evidence also. So that is why it is important to have your documentation in order. If there's a sexual harassment policy, how was the harassment done? Do you have any witnesses and all? And I'd also like to just mention something that she has talked about,
briefly as we wind up.
Persistence.
Yes.
I think it is quite unfortunate that sexual harassment, you have to prove that it was persistent, because once is enough.
Yes.
Yeah,
it doesn't have
to be a lot of times. Once is enough, and I think that ought to be looked into.
And perhaps when these reports are made and people are made examples of, that also could be a contributor to it coming to an end. And this has been Jen Godier, who's the program manager for Women in News and trustee, African Gender and Media Initiative Trust, as well as Winnie Odali, who's an advocate of the High Court, giving us their take on how to handle sexual harassment in the workplace or in whatever other environment that this might be happening. And that has been Black and White. And we're taking a short break. When we come back, we'll have international news for you. This is Morning Express.